Hello, fellow solvers. This is Cog with Cog Analytics, jumping into the Alteryx Designer Desktop Forum, Community Forum, taking a look at a question here, suggestions for dynamic transposition of columns to rows in Alteryx. Essentially what this problem is asking is how can we flip, really copy the Excel functionality of transposing, so flipping rows and columns so that all rows turn into columns and columns turn into rows. So this is a pretty simple use case for Alteryx, but there is some thought that we'll need to go into how to do this. Especially, you can see one of the points that was made by the original poster is maintaining the consistent and correctly aligned new columns based on what's been transposed. So we'll get into how to build this workflow, but then I want to showcase too a tool that I built based off of this question called the Flip tool, which is currently in the gallery. I'll include a link down in the description for this, which does exactly that in just one tool so that nobody else needs to build this out. So with that, we'll jump into Alteryx. You can see here I've built out the beginnings of a workflow. If we run this, you can see it generates a table with a random number of columns just to showcase the functionality that we're building. If we run it one more time, you can see that, well, that time it's, there you go. So random number of columns. And with that, we'll jump into how to build this out. So anytime we're dealing with pivoting, we're going to want to go to the transform tools, and transpose and crosstab are going to be our go-tos. So to begin with, we'll go ahead and transpose the data. Well, actually what we'll do is add a record ID, and we'll discuss why in a minute. Okay, then we'll transpose the data, grouping by record ID and parameter, which is the column that has the new field name. So these are going to turn into the new column names when these turn into rows. These are going to be our new columns. So first we'll transpose the data, including or ensuring that we have the dynamic or unknown columns box checked. Once that's done, we can go ahead and see the output here. And now we have a large vertical table with all our data included. So one of the first things we're going to want to do at this point is transform this, or add on to this, a method of sorting the data. So with AMP engine, as we're performing these operations, we're not guaranteed that the order is going to be maintained, but we do want to keep track of which column came first in the original list so that this order can be preserved once the flip is done. So for that, we're going to add a new field, and we'll call this row number. Go ahead and copy that. We want to group by parameter, not name, we want to group by parameter. So for each row that we originally had, we're keeping track of what the column order was, since what comes after the transpose is maintained. So there's no sorting that happens here. So that's a clean operation. So after parameter, and the expression is simple enough, it's just the row minus 1 of row number plus 1. And make sure that the values for rows that don't exist is set to 0 so that we get the climbing index. There you go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, this time there were 9 columns. Okay, perfect. So that's exactly what we need. Next, we're going to crosstab, and this is where the actual flipping is going to take place. So we transpose to get all the columns turned into one large column. And now when we crosstab it, instead of going on the columns, we're going to go on what was the rows, what the new columns are going to be. So we want to group by, in this case, name, which is our column names. Our new column headers are going to be the parameters that we talked about, and the value is going to just be the value that we had already. We do need to choose a method for aggregating values. In our case, we'll just do first. It doesn't really matter what we have. And first is, if we have text data, this is available and it will always work. So this will work for all data types. And if we run this, you can see now that we have indeed flipped everything. But just like we described before, all our columns are mixed up. So one of the things we'll throw back in is the row number will be grouped on as well. And then we can add a sort. And we'll sort on that row number. Okay, and there you go. You can see we have successfully flipped our original columns. Order is preserved. And this is done. The other thing that we're going to need to take into account and fix, this is just to showcase kind of the main functionality or the approach to take to solve this problem, but the parameters here, the rows that are now the new column names, are in crosstab. Crosstab sorts your columns in alphabetical order. I don't know why it does that. It also replaces any non-letter or numerical character with an underscore. So in order to work around this issue, there are some kind of extra steps that we have to take. One of those is going to be indexing the field name, and then we'll do a rename on the column. So to do that, instead of just cross-tabbing here, after our row num, let's see, we can do that. Okay, so what we're going to do is here we can see the record ID matches the column. So there's a one-to-one relationship between the new column names and the record ID. So we will use that to our advantage, and instead, because we know that the record ID is sorted in the right order and is a pre-sorted list, so it's indexed list, we can cross-tab on that, and now when we run this, we will have a guarantee that column 1 here represents what was row 1 in the original data. Column 2 would represent what was row 2, so we can see here after this. So 1, 2, and 3, this order is always going to be preserved. So now all we need to do is add into that in the developer tools the dynamic rename, and we can drag that from here. And we want to take field names from right input rows. We're going to ignore if anything's missing because nothing should be missing. And our old field name is the record ID. The new field name is what's in parameter. And that should be all that we need to do. So if we run this now, you can see that we have overcome the cross-tabbing behavior of adding an underscore to our column headers. So all of these now match exactly with what was the row labels. And then after our sort, we now have the proper order. Last but not least, we'll add a select in order to clean up the extra field that we added. And we'll add a browse to the end of this to complete the workflow so that now we can run this and view our outputted data, which started off looking like this. We have 3 parameters, so 3 fixed columns. In this case, we have 2 dynamic columns of data. We're going to flip that so that we have, you can now see we have 2 rows and 3 columns. Parameter 1, 2, and 3 are in their respective order as it was in the input, and the names match. So, like I said, you can do all of this yourself, or in Transform, you can go to the gallery, like I mentioned, take that flip tool that I've posted there, connect this up. You can select which column is the new field name column. In this case, it's parameter. And when you run that, you can see here you have exactly the same output. So, hope this helps. Happy solving, guys.